G'day guys, welcome back to SuperCoach with DR and welcome to a very, very special episode today. It's the one you've been waiting for. I'm joined by my man Janath today and we are going to take you through how to win SuperCoach in just 12 steps. So Janath, thank you very much again for coming on, legend. How have you been, mate?
Not bad, brother. Doing good. Doing well and truly into medical research right now. But SuperCoach is taking precedence for a couple of weeks, so we'll keep it at that, I reckon, in terms of how our career is tracking.
Well, you've got to get your priorities right, don't you? It's SuperCoach season, so don't worry about the medical research.
One more week.
Let's just bang out some SuperCoach stuff, mate. Absolutely. Look, we love having you on the channel because you are the numbers man. And we're going to go through, as we mentioned in the intro, the 12 steps to SuperCoach success this year. There can only be one winner, but I reckon it's going to be out of one of our listeners today, Janath. I'm pretty confident of that, mate. But look, let's get straight into it. We're going to start off with number one, and that is perfecting your team structure. We've got the Guns and Rookies structure here. You can see that Janath has put another table for us together here, the absolute king of the tables. The color code here is green for keepers, obviously mid-price in orange. We can't see them yet, and the rookies in red. So, Janath, take us away, mate. How do we perfect our team structure?
Well, I don't think Guns and Rookies in this way is the way to go this year, personally. Obviously, you can see there's no mid-prices in there, but we know there's a lot of relevant mid-prices that we'll get to, won't we, DR?
Absolutely, absolutely.
So, what do you reckon? Do you reckon Guns and Rookies is something you're considering at all this year?
Look, I'm a bit of a SuperCoach veteran, so played for a long, long time. And back in the day, this was the approach that you took. Guns and Rookies was the proven approach. But I think particularly in the last couple of years, SuperCoach is slowly but surely moving towards more of a fantasy style of game. And we know the difference there. You've got to focus a little bit more on value. I think with some of the extra trades, we've got boosts, which we'll talk about a little bit later. I don't think it's as viable as what it's been in the past, because we saw last year there were a lot of mid-price options that actually worked out pretty well for us. A couple even became keepers. So I'm actually probably straying away from the Guns and Rookies approach myself, mate. Do you agree with that, or any different thoughts?
I think you're on the money there, mate. Especially in terms of last year, we're going to get to, if you want to go to the next one, mid-price mayhem. If you started mid-price mayhem, which I know that JP, the winner from last year, did, this was where the money was at. When you have players like Sicily, Doherty, Cogs, Brody, that's 4 keepers right there. You combine them under 1.5 mil together start of the season. It's perfect. Now, whether that's the case this year, I think this is a bit risky, especially M3 to M6, all mid-prices. That's a fair risk to take, especially if they don't come off now. Yes, you do have those extra trades, but how many do you want to be using at the start of the season? That sort of thing. So what we've sort of come up with together, DA, it's a bit of a rogue strategy, but what about the mix?
Let's take a look at the mix. We can see some green, some yellow, some red. It's a bit of a rainbow here. Janath, a few more colours around. I like a bit of colour in our SuperCoach live. So tell us about the mix structure and why you think that may be a nice approach to go this year.
So if we decipher this, I'd rather say the term keepers as opposed to premiums. The reason being there is that a keeper is someone that you want to have in your final team. Ideally, if they don't get injured and they don't get suspended for the whole season, you want to have them at the end of the season in the final team. So this team goes by 2-4-2-4 keeper structure, which is something I'm seeing a lot of, and it's personally what I'm going with. In my team is the 2-4-2-4 keeper structure with 4 mid-prices. Now, what this allows you to do is a mid-price is classified, in my opinion, as anyone that is higher than the cheapest rookie that's entering the season. So Ashcroft is not the cheapest rookie, the most expensive first-year player. So that's Will Ashcroft at 207K. Anyone above 207K that is not a keeper is considered a mid-pricer. Salim Jones, mid-pricer. In that way, you can see that a lot of these positions, you're trying to minimize the amount of risk attached with fielding rookies. whilst also minimizing the risk attached with fielding too many primos, mid prices. Sorry. So mixed structure is something that I've seen a lot more of, and it's something which I think is very handy, especially going into a season like this where you do have 36 trades, one extra round, which allows a bit more movement, but certainly something that a lot of coaches will be weighing up. What do you reckon, GR?
Yeah, well, I suppose a big question that's been asked of me this year is how many keepers do we need to have in our side? And I'm seeing a lot of teams going with probably 11. I think that that's absolute minimum. If you're going less than 11 keepers, then you're going to have to just use too many trades to get these blokes up to the absolute elite. So I think it's extremely dangerous going too mid-pricey. I like this mix here. And I must admit that another question I've got is, well, how many mid-prices are too many? Yeah, we'll talk about the mid-prices a little bit more and maybe how to pick between a trap and an actually successful mid-pricer. But I think it's really, really tough this year in particular to get the balance because there are a few speculative ones. And if you don't get them right, then you're in some big trouble, I think, mate. So I think that you can almost minimize some risks by adding a couple of mid-prices, getting those proven premiums that we know of, also with a couple of rookies sprinkled in there as well. So that's probably the structure that I like the mix. You too, mate?
Yeah, and the logic behind going with a guns and rookies approach is you don't need to waste trades on getting those mid prices up. But at the same time, the logic behind mid-price MAM is you get more value, that you have more money to spend to get those fallen premiums or keepers down the line. So a mixed structure is where you can fit it into both. You don't need to worry about the 12 keepers you start with, ideally, but then you do have a little bit more extra money cash gen happening from those mid prices to ultimately get, you could say, a 600k play, which is almost impossible with two rookies, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. Very true. And another thing I quickly wanted to bring up as well when you are creating your team structure is be very wary of starting too many 102k rookies, because if you've got an empty bank balance, for example, just say you've got a Chincotta over a Cowan with 4 or 5 grand in the bank, then you may be in a little bit of trouble and you may be scrambling late. So I think that's something else that's important to make sure you do is have a bit of a backup plan if you're starting with 102k rookies to get them up if need be.
100%. Shall we move on?
Let's move on to number 2. So we'll get this screen off and we'll go to number 2. It is deciphering breakouts versus traps. And this is tough. It's tougher than you think it is. We've had some great breakouts last year. Look, Will Brodie was a terrific one, ended up being a keeper for us. Pretty successful last year, but there are also some traps. There are always traps at this stage of the year, particularly after the preseason games. We've seen some blokes that have been absolutely flying. But Janath, what do we do, mate? What are the steps here or the rules to decide the difference between a breakout and an absolute trap?
Well, I might steal a line from the great JB at WINNING SuperCoach. I like looking at the eye test, roll, and then score in SuperCoach for our preseason games. The reason being is the score is just, it's so dynamic between games. You have games in the preseason that you saw the Saints Essendon game, the ball's not even flying in one direction. There's going to be less marks in those games. So it's hard to decipher whether Jack Steele is covering the ground well or anything, because every ball that's going to with the wind is traveling. You're not going to have 15-meter dink kicks in. You're going to get the ball down there. So stuff like that, it's very dynamic what a score ends up looking like. But what I do like to see is the eye test. Tanner Brun, for instance, really passed the eye test a couple of times. He had a close call with Lachie Neale, like a good hard ground ball get. And you just see stuff like that, and you think the coach has to be happy with that. And then that leads into the role. So if a player has no CBAs and scores 117, aka Finn Callahan, compared to a Jack Steele who has 90% CBAs and scores 84. Yes, they're in two completely different brackets, but you can't, they're not both apples. You can't compare them in that sense. So in terms of the breakout, can someone like a Callahan compared to someone like a Bruin, it makes it quite hard to just look at their scores and say, okay, they're both equal, even though they're scored very similar. You then go back to their roles, and if they pass the eye test. If we want to have a think back to 2020, I know the big name that we're thinking about is Christian Petrarca.
Yes.
Well, I'll just remind you that Darcy McPherson scored, I think, 130 in both the preseason games, and he didn't do anything.
He almost trapped me, Darcy. I remember that. He almost lured me in.
which is what we're trying to bring here with Errol Goulden. I think that's the key one, right? He's the prime breakout candidate.
Absolutely. He has been giving me stress. Do I actually start this man? Do I fade him? Oh, it's very hard to go away from the crowd because his ownership has absolutely skyrocketed after that preseason game, and for good reasoning as well. Another thing I quickly want to throw out there in regards to these preseason games is who's actually not playing from a particular side. Who's injured, who's rested, and Errol, I suppose, is a perfect example when you look at someone like a Papley, a Mills type. How are these blokes going to affect someone like an Errol Goulden? And this is just one example, but I think it's a general rule across the competition when you are looking at these practice games. Are there some superstars out of the side that are going to come right back into those roles? And some of the blokes that actually look good in those roles, is it realistic that they're going to keep them for the season? Probably not in some cases. So that's another thing I think you've really got to keep in mind as well. Who is actually out of the side, who's rested, and even who's injured. There may be a spot for a few weeks. Maybe we're looking at someone like Geelong. I don't know if Tomahawk's going to be fit to start the season or not, but let's just say that maybe he misses the first 2 weeks. He's going to come straight back in. Someone's going to have to come out. So I think it's really important to look at that aspect of things as well, mate.
And then I guess from a statistical side of things, which I love, you've got to have a look at where's the scope for improvement. So someone like Errol Goulden, 10% CBAs for 85. In his first season, he scored, I think, 74 average with like 6% CBAs. And then he scored 188 with 69% CBAs. Now, I'm not saying he's going to get 70% CBAs in the regular season, but if he gets 40%, 30%, 40%, he's got a massive ceiling. And I guess one thing that I know we might not be agreeing here as of yet, but you've got to admit that if he has the ball inside 50, he's going to find the target who's going to score a goal.
The talent is phenomenal. Yeah,
exactly. He scored 135 in both of his first 2 games with 0% CBAs. If you remember. So he doesn't need those CBAs.
I want to put a team update soon, mate. Jeez.
We did this last year as well. I know the reasons why you don't want to go Goulden. And it's totally fair. I want to go Goulden. He's just a fun player to watch. He seems like the perfect breakout candidate. He could be a trap. If he is a trap, strength in numbers, you're not going to go down alone. Which is another thing with breakouts versus traps here is if you are not convinced that your player is going to break out and he's a pod, I probably wouldn't go with him. You've got to be 100% convicted that he's going to be a breakout if he's at a low ownership.
Well, I think getting back to a point that you made before, the upside to someone like Errol is that he doesn't need to do exactly what he did in the preseason. He doesn't need 70%. He needs maybe up to 30, 40%. Yeah. That's all that this bloke needs. It does make so much sense. And questions, answers, decisions. So much going around my head with Errol Goulden. But look, I think he's got all the tools needed to break out this year.
Yeah.
Still on the fence a little bit though, mate.
It is one of those difficult decisions. And there's just so much to weigh up with regards to breakouts. I really like the idea that if you see a James Warple, he had a really good game. 30 odd possessions. I think he was like 19 contested possessions, a bunch of clearances, and he got into the ton. Where's his scope for improvement in the season? So can he realistically get another ton? Does he score a ton every game? He only got 101, 9 clearances, 17 contested possessions, for 30 possessions, 4 ton. And he's like, all right, can he break out more? Where's his scope for improvement? And I guess that's what a lot of coaches would be considering.
Yeah, look, do we need a 40 possession game for a 125 plus from this bloke? That's what we're not sure of. And that's another really good point. If we've seen basically one of the better games that a player could produce, and they're only sort of getting to that ton, then yeah, there's some red flags for me straight away, because what happens when they have a bit of an off game, you're probably looking at maybe a 50 or a 60, aren't you? So yeah, certainly the potential with lots of these mid prices to be traps. But anything else you want to add to that before we get into step 3, mate?
All good. Go for it.
All right, well, let's change pace a little bit here. We've talked a little bit about breakouts and traps, but let's get on to the premiums and the keepers, how to pick between 2 keepers. We all have these problems in the preseason. You've got those blokes that you want both of them in your side, but you just don't have room. You've got to make a decision at the end of the day, and it's really, really tough sometimes. You're pulling hairs, you're splitting hairs. Do you have any advice for us, mate, on what on earth we do when we need to decide between 2 keepers?
It is fully team dependent. Sometimes when I've been picking starting teams, I just go with the player I like to watch more. It does make it really difficult, but Supercoach is a game of fun. You've got to enjoy watching your plays. You don't want to have your hairs pulled out because Clary goes and was one year, who was it that punched someone, he broke his fist. He's like, you want to enjoy watching your players. But I guess on a more analytical level, the main things you want to be considering is there scope for DPP. So if you're considering between Max Gawn and Sean Darcy, Max Gawn may get DPP. And if that's your consideration, you want another forward by round 6, you go with they'll sort of slide into what we'll talk about a bit later. But then at the same time, does the 60K save between Gawn and Darcy, what does that do in terms of your team? Can you go up from a rookie forward to a Sava or a Harry Sheasel? Is that what that allows you to do? So it's not straightforward. I guess with mid keepers especially, everyone has their own rankings. There's no such thing as an objective midfield ranking, because we haven't seen these guys in the home and away season yet. So I've got Rory Laird and Marcus Bontempelli as my 1A and my 1B. But at the same time, it could be Clayton Oliver that's the number 1 at the end of the season. So you've just got to back your gut, but at the same time, think about possible role changes beyond the season. How are they viewed in terms of who left the side last season? Someone like Josh Dunkley leaving, that helps him at Brisbane, your mob DI, and then also it helps the likes of Jack McRae, Marcus Bontempelli. And we may also want to be considering their buys, their tags. Are they likely to get tagged? Do they have a good buy? I'm really liking the early buy, the first one. 4 teams have it, but still it's a best 20, best 18 buy. So there's not 6 teams in that. So you want to target the early buy for once, which is something you don't normally do that, because you sort of want to stack up on players after they have their buy. So it's a lot to consider there, but that's just my thought process when really thinking about 2 keepers. What's their scope for improvement? Josh Kelly at 580K, can he go to that next level with 65% plus CBAs? Your thoughts, VR?
Yeah, I totally agree. Totally agree. I think draw is also an important thing as well. Just the little things like you're going to come up against a Finn McGuinness tag twice in the year. You're only playing Hawthorn once. That's always something I think that you need to look out for. When are those tags actually going to come? And another thing I agree with is the fact that I wouldn't be surprised to see, any of the top 5 midfielders end up as number 1 scorer this year. I don't think it would surprise too many people. I've got Rory Laird there at the moment, but I would not be surprised to see a Bont there, even someone like Lockie Neal. There's many guys that could actually get to the top. So I think that's, absolutely true. You've got to look for the little things, don't you? As you mentioned there, and you are really splitting hairs. But I like how you mentioned the buys as well. We might talk about buys a little bit later. How much do we take that into account? Well, I think that you do when you are really 50-50 on a play, you've got to look for other measures, don't you? I think you've got to look at scoring history as well. And durability is another big thing for me. So if you're 50-50 on two players and one bloke's got, for example, a history of soft tissues, then it would probably lean me towards the other player that I think has a better chance of actually playing 23 games for the season.
And let me throw something to it. I know this is, I have I forgot his name on Twitter, but there's a good study going around about the role, the effect that the captaincy has on Supercoach players. Now, I personally think should be a positive regression. That means there's a positive association with being named a captain and Supercoach score, more responsibility, less likely to fade out of games. So you might be thinking, what's the effect this may have on a Jordan Dawson at Adelaide, James Sicily at Hawthorn, Lachie Neale at Brisbane? I think they're better picks, honestly. As a captain, you're less likely, if Lachie Neale's getting tagged, he's not going to want to just zone out of the game. He can't, he's the captain. More scrutiny if he doesn't perform. So again, if you're picking between a Tom Stewart and a Jordan Dawson, is that something that plays into your favor? There's no stats that say captains perform better, but at the same time, it is something to consider as an intangible for Supercoach scoring.
Another good point. Geez, Tommy Stewart was close, wasn't he? Got the Vice this year. He was actually my pick. I thought they'd actually go with Stewart, but obviously Danger, well-deserved after a magnificent career there as well. But look, definitely something to keep into account. People have different opinions about this. Some people say, oh, there's too much pressure. They don't think about their own game. They worry more about the team. But you've got a bit of a different take on that, Janath, which I absolutely love, mate.
That's the beauty of Supercoach is there's just so multifaceted. It's not just an average. There's so many things that comes into it. From preseason games, do they perform their role? Do they perform it well? Have they done something stupid to tick off the coach? It's very multifaceted in that way.
Very true, mate. Very true. Well, are you ready to go into step 4 now, mate?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Now, we've already touched on this a little bit, and it's how to pick between two mid prices. This is a big issue for me this year. A big, big issue, mate. We've got a few options, don't we, in our midfields? We've got the Hoppers, the Warples, even Will Setterfield, I think, is a more popular pick after the practice matches up forward. We've got Bruin, Fife, Flanders, Zeeble for the people that are that way inclined. What on earth do we do here, mate? How do we pick between two mid prices? Do you have any strategies up your sleeve, Janath?
I think there's a slight difference between when you're thinking about two keepers and between two mid prices, because with keepers, you do not want to trade them out of round 3 if they're not working. With a mid pricer, though, you can take the element of risk, which is something we were talking about last year as well. You start the mid pricer with the higher price. So assuming you have no money in your bank, you can always trade down to someone as opposed to starting the cheaper one, like a Flanders, but you want to get Bruin at round 3 and you don't have the funds to do it without making another trade.
Absolutely.
And so that's something that I consider a lot when I'm picking my mid prices. And then again, it comes down to this 2-step rule. Okay, if both players mid price were the same price, who would I prefer? Will Setterfield or Jacob Hopper? And then Setterfield, I think, is 18K more expensive. 16K more expensive. What does that 16K do? If I like Will Setterfield more than Jacob Hopper, which personally I don't, I think Hopper plays himself more as a midfielder than Will Setterfield will as a pure midfielder. But if I did like Setterfield more, is that 16K worth it to go Setterfield over Hopper? What does that do for the rest of the team? What comes into your thought process, Dio?
Look, there's a few things. Obviously, that extra 16K in the example you used there with Setterfield compared to a Hopper, certainly got to come into play. As I mentioned before, if you're starting one of those 102K rookies, you need to get him up really quick. That could be a quick option there. And it comes back to what you mentioned before about starting with the high price mid-pricer. It could be a Warple over a Callaghan. It could be a Bruin over a Flanders, for example. I think that's really, really key to when you're looking to select these players in the mid-price range, mate.
Yeah, certainly. And you can always correct a mistake. especially one where you are very convicted by it and you believe that that's the case. If you want to start Nat Fife over Tanner Bruin, completely fine given the early season schedule. The only thing is if you pick Nat Fife and it doesn't work for rounds 1 and 2, then you can always come down to a Tanner Bruin.
Yep.
This is, and that's good. That can be done in a trade because Fife is more expensive than Bruin is. It's that we were talking about this last year. I remember with our Will Brodie, Mitch McGovern, Tristan Cherry discussion, and it's still an age. It still is applicable now in this season as well. So just that's something to keep in mind.
Another thing quickly I want to bring up in regards to mid prices is ownership, player ownership. So, for example, Hopper, what's he over 50% of teams by now? I think it's high 40s, 50s. I'm not exactly sure off the top of my head, but backing against someone like a Jacob Hopper can be a little bit dangerous. You know, if you're going with a mid pricer that's saying 3 to 5% of sides, as opposed to someone like a Hopper who half the competition owns, it can work out really well. Don't get me wrong, but it can also be very, very dangerous. So I think that another strategy that some people might want to take is to maybe select the mid pricer that does have the highest ownership, because I think that gives you a little bit of security there as well. It really depends on how you want to play it. Do you want to play it safe and go with the crowd? Or do you want to go, no, I'm going to be an absolute lone ranger here. I'll select the other mid pricer and I'm prepared to cop the consequences, whatever they are, positive or negative.
And that's the thing. Let me so Hopper's owned by 46% of the comp. There's a little bit of a difference between picking a pod primo and a pod mid pricer. Because if you pick a pod primo, and they should still score comparatively close to the other guys. So for instance, Josh Kelly versus Jack Steele. Steele is more popular owned. Kelly is more for pod. They're going to score quite similar. Yeah, I can't see them scoring more than 10 points apart from each other. Either way. Yeah. But the thing is with picking a pod mid-pricer, and if that goes wrong, not only do you lose the points to the mid-price, but you also lose the cash. Because you're not going to trade out the keeper either way. But with the mid-pricer, you're losing that possible cash gen. If you go Setherfield over Hopper, Setherfield averages 65, Hop averages 85, you lose 20 points per round and you lose that difference in cash gen as well. Now, those were hypothetical numbers. It could be the other way around. But again, it comes back to, do you want to go with the crowd? Do you want to go in that poddish move? But hopefully that distinction between a pod mid-price and a pod keeper becomes clearer there.
Absolutely, mate. Could not agree more. Could not agree more. Bloody good discussion, that I tell you what. You ready to go on number 5, mate? Are we ready to go into number 5?
This will be good.
Now we're going to talk about picking early season bench rookies. You need to get this right. You need to get this right. If you don't have the right rookies early on, then it's season over, basically, in my opinion. But we are lucky that we get a couple of weeks to view how these blokes are looking before the price rises. But Janath, advice on picking early season bench rookies, mate?
Now, for this, I think you've got to find the right balance between scoring potential, which equates to cash gen, and job security. The last thing you want to do is pick a guy like Mitch Owens last year. I was so high on Mitch Owens last year. Pick a guy, scores sub 10 in his first game, gets dropped, and he's not even a floating donut because they don't have good fixtures. I think this year's one, which thankfully didn't suck us in the preseason, is Judd McVeigh. Because if he played and he got plonked on our starting benches and he got dropped, his loophole schedule is awful for our VCC. So you just end up with a guy on the bench that you can't use for looping, and you obviously can't feel. There's no cash gen happening.
Just a dead rookie, basically, isn't it? The definition basically dead rookie.
He's just a dead rookie, which is what I really suggest with regards to bench rookies is to go for JS, job security, over the cash gen. Because if they're going to be on your bench, yes, they can still appreciate in value over time, but you're more likely to have a higher degree of appreciation if they're not on your field, and you don't need to worry about how many points they're scoring on a weekly basis if they're on your bench and they're doing it over a prolonged period of time, as opposed to really quick cash gen. but they don't have good JS, so they may only have 5 weeks to make their cash. Whatever cash you make there, you take. But if they're on your bench, you're not going to get those points anyway, so it doesn't really make a difference. What do you reckon, Dio?
Absolutely agree. Absolutely agree. It's such a key, as I mentioned before, to get this right. And I think job security when it comes to rookies is essential, because you don't want to be in 3-4 rounds and you're dealing with 3 rookies on your bench. That's when you're going to waste trades, and that's where you're going to lose out on making some other potential moves later on in the season. Now, a question I've got for you, Janath, is how much is too much to have on our bench? So Toby McLean, Asava Radigalia, Phillips, I've seen on many benches during the preseason so far. If you're really tossing up between, let's just say, a Campbell Chesser and a Toby McLean, Chesser, you may be a little bit worried about that scoring potential, a little bit more about job security. There may be another player who you think, has that better job security, but is at that higher price, even 50K more. Do you think it's worth actually spending up a little bit extra on your bench, mate?
Yeah, that's a really good point you raised there. It's really context dependent. Let's take Campbell Chesser, for instance. In my opinion, if he gets named round 1, he has really good job security. That being is that in a full strength defensive lineup, or even on a wing, if he gets named round 1, it means that he's in their plans. He's not filling in for someone, which is really important. The same thing with Lockie Carlton. If he gets named round 1, I can't see him getting dropped early. The reason being is you don't bring in a debutant that is not filling in someone else's position to drop them early if they have a bad game.
Yep.
And this will be really important. And this is why I think if Chesser and McLean both get named, and McLean is going to be your M9 or F7, it comes down to what your team needs. Do you need a guy to loop at M9 or F7? If McLean's just going to be on your bench, there's no point in having him, because yes, he may make 150K, but he's not giving you any points on the field, and his JS is arguably poorer than Campbell Chesser's is if he gets named round 1, and that's where the subjectivity comes into it. Is what do you think this player's job security is? How are you feeling, DR, about that? Are you starting Toby McLean?
I'm not at the moment. And it comes back to what we talked about before with the eye test. He just didn't pass the eye test for me. And I think there are other players that are cheaper, right? A cheaper price, that should present as much value and give you as much job security. One thing that you sort of touched on there was DPP. And this is something that I really take into account a lot. I love DPP. It gives you so many swings and so many options, not only with looping, but also with trading as well. So one thing that I've tried to do this year is get some DPP in my midfield. I'm running with, I think, 3 defensive midfield rookies at the moment. And so someone like a Chesser in my midfield gives me that link all of a sudden, a Davey in the midfield as well. I think that the 6 blokes I've got on field in my forward line are all mid forwards as well. So there's that loop there just in case you need it. Yes. Even up forward, a Asava as that ruck cover might be something that people want to think about as well. So DPP for me is absolute king, and it just opens up so many more options for you, mate.
We'll have a chat about this, but I do have a Asava at F7 as well. Just because if Marshall or Darcy goes down, you don't want to have to trade in a guy. You want to have him there already. And I guess with strategy again is a lot of people are starting Nick Madden this year as a loop because he has really good loop fixtures. I'm thinking of doing the same because it allows you to have that swing with Asava, and the 20K that's say from McAndrew from Sydney, it may just be a couple of rounds from him. He may not even get that first price rise. It's just, what's the point, right? If he gets 2 price rises, he gets to 190K. You can't trade him out. He hasn't made enough money to be worth
in
a
no
trade
man's land.
Yeah, in no man's land. So just rather have a floating rookie that I can choose the team of for the loophole rather than get forced into using the loophole of whatever guy gets dropped first, for instance.
Absolutely my strategy too. They say great minds think alike. Asava currently sitting at F7 for me as well, mate. Absolutely
Very nice.
love that strategy. Could not agree
Love it.
more. It's a little bit scary, particularly with so many question marks in the rucks, with durability issues as well. I really like that added security of having a Sava there. And another thing that we've also got to take into account as well, if you are running a Madden loop, is that all of a sudden you now have a loop in your forward line if you need it as well. If you get one of those really early great rookie bench scores. So something I think might be important to do is check out the fixture, see who you've actually got, say at F8, F6, F7, whoever it is, and see if you may even be able to chuck the emergency on one of the early playing players. And then you can even chuck a Sava at R3, bring Madden down and get that loop score. It just opens up a lot of options. I know that someone like JD is completely against the loophole, and for good reason. You want early cash gen, but I think you can take advantage of those captain scores and potentially some good rookie scores. I know Spills last year managed to jump on, I think it was a Jack Hayes or a Rochelle type score, or as a Martin, one of those bigger scores. And I think he got a couple of them early on in the season, which really gave him a really red hot start. So, each their own with a loophole, but I'll certainly be running Nick Madden this year myself, mate.
I guess what I want to tell people right now is if you're not starting Madden or floated donut right now, do not bring one in if one of your emergencies does well for round one. So you don't want to change your plans based off of what has happened. I guess what I'm trying to say, there's someone like Jack Hayes, he scored 120 on a Friday last year. And a lot of people would have been tempted to say, all right, let me bring in a donut to into this mix to get that one score. Because it may just be that one score that you're going to get for the rest of the season. And so if you plan on starting a donut right now, brilliant. If you don't, stick with your gut, because there's a reason why you don't want to start a donut, and you don't need to be reactive to one score to bring one in and go with the crowd if that's what people are saying or people are thinking. Just back your gut in, which is something that we're going to talk about a bit later, isn't it, DR?
That's right, mate. That's right. I absolutely agree again. Absolutely agree again with everything that you've said there, mate.
So it's really important that I've been quite lucky to. I got the Jack Hayes and Nick Martin scores last year, and I think it was James Rowe the year before.
Oh, yes.
Which is classic. So
we always missed out on him.
James Rowe, Errol Goulden, both got 120s.
Yeah.
So you just got to start these early season rookies that show promise, and none of them were looped. So I'll say that I did start them on field, all four of them in both years.
Nice work.
Yeah, so I'll take that. But you don't need to start a loop if you don't think that's part of what is going to make your team as optimal as possible.
Yeah, wouldn't you be spewing if just say, you end up bringing a loop to take advantage of an early score, and then the next week, the bloke that scored well round one absolutely fizzles out, and the bloke that you traded out suddenly gets a decent one? You'd absolutely be kicking yourself, wouldn't you, mate?
Or even a guy you have on the rest of your bench gets dropped, and then a perfect loophole. So you just have a loophole there that's just it's not needed. So it's just all to consider. But I really like your point about having both a defensive mid and a mid forward DPP on your mid bench, because it provides you with the swing and the coverage without having to use trades later in the season, like early in the season, later in the season, even for trades as well.
Yeah, just that little bit of extra security, I think, mate. All right, let's get in onto a very important rule, the 150K rule of thumb. And I think we also have a bit of a slide for this one as well that you've come up with here, Janath. Absolutely elite again, mate. So take us through what you've got here. We've got the defenders, midfielders, and forwards. When we get to the forwards, I might just take the banner down there because I think it might be covering a little bit there. But tell us what great work you've done here, mate.
So this just basically, sorry, for the midfielders and forwards, just left off their first names, but that's my bad. But I'm sure a lot of people know who each of these guys are.
We get it, mate. All good, we get it.
But for basically what this sort of rule of thumb is it's quite relevant for your mid prices and your higher priced rookies. Is so they're priced at a certain value based off of either the average last year or the draft position if they're a first year player. What is the price what is the average they need to net 150k profit? Now, DR as a veteran, do you want to explain to the viewers what the 150k means or why it's significant?
Well, it's always been a bit of an unwritten rule. You won't log into SuperCoach, click on the rules section, say you must make 150k. But I think generally, most people in the SuperCoach community view a trade to the value of 150k, basically. So whenever we're selecting a player that we don't view as a keeper in our side, most occasions, and there might be some slightly different circumstances, which I'll mention in a little bit, but the main objective is to try to make 150k. We view that as enough profit to then be able to move on and use that profit to upgrade somewhere else. But with someone like, for example, an Elliot Yeo, I might be prepared not even to make right up to 150k, but if he can provide some good on-field scoring for me and even make 100 to 120k, I might be happy enough with that personally. So different circumstances, but as a general rule, we want to be making 150k minimum from our rookies and mid prices, particularly our rookies. We've had some terrific ones in the past. Now we think back to a Sam Walsh. I think even possibly Will Ashcroft this year could go well past 150k. Could he even get keeper status this year? Will Ashcroft, the 2023 Rising Star keeper winner. Sorry, I think that's probably going a little bit too far there. But Janath, let's get into this table, mate. You've got some players, positions, and what they need to actually average to make that magic 150k.
So what you might see if you log into SuperCoach and you click on a player, you'll see their break even or what they're priced at. Their average, that's their average from not the average from last year, but it's their break even. So what the break even is what the score you need to not lose any value, but not gain any value either. Now, for someone like an Elliot Yeo, if he scores 89 every single game, he will make 150k in, let's say, 6, 7, 8 weeks, possibly. Now, I'm not quite sure on the weeks because that's when the variability comes into it. So let's take a Liam Jones, for example. He needs to average 69 to gain 150k. But we know Liam Jones. Liam Jones loves to intercept. So he may score 105 in 1 week, and then 50 in another, and then 72 in another week. Now, that variability may lead to him having larger increases in price, followed by a smaller one, and then a large one. So that sort of thing is something you want to consider as well, because the players that have higher ceilings are more likely to make the money quicker. And that allows you to trade them out earlier to increase what we call as the upgrade cadence. You want to be upgrading once upgrade season starts every single week, one player in and one rookie in. One keeper in, one rookie in for two of your fully pigged up rookies that are, or mid prices that are fully appreciated in value.
Ready to cull. Ready to cull.
Ready to cull them. And so you can see that someone like a Ruben Jinby, priced at 31, he needs to score 59, average 59 to gain 150k. And so that's a perfect rookie. Same with Ashcroft. High JS, high scoring potential. They should get that quite comfortably. And so you can start to think about whether or not someone like a Will Setherfield, who's priced at 63 to start the season, he needs to average 91 to net 150k. Now, it's not as simple as saying, will he score 91? Because not only is he going to increase in value, but he's providing you valuable points on your field. And that's what you were talking about, DR. Wasn't someone like Yo, you're not worried if he makes 120k because he's going to get you points on a week-to-week basis. That's better than having a rookie in that position.
That's right. That's right, mate. Look, I want to quickly move down to a player in the forward line you've got here, Nathan Fyfe. And you did mention before that there's no guarantee that you're going to get a particular average each week. I think with someone like Nathan Fyfe, what I look at is his early draw. And when those big spike games may actually be coming. Now, his first 3 weeks are St Kilda, and I forget the order of the next two, but it's West Coast and North Melbourne as well. So if we're looking at a mid-price option such as Nathan Fyfe with a draw like he has for the first 3 weeks, in my opinion, there may be a couple of really nice spike games there. And he may be a player that may be able to make that 150K a lot earlier than maybe some of these other players whose scores will average out around that, around that same sort of score each week. So that's another reason why Fife is high in consideration from my side, because I think he's one of the players that can make that money a little bit earlier than other players, mate.
Totally agree. And if it comes down to Brun versus Fife, and if Brun isn't named in round 1, it's an easy call to move on to Fife, because that potential, I think he averages like something ridiculous against North. It's like 126.6 average
Crazy.
Against North. Now he's not going to be a midfielder. But if that's your round 2 score, if he's in round 2 against North and he scores 115, you're halfway there. Because at round 2 to round 3, there's going to be the first price rise, and he's going to appreciate by a lot. A lot of people may get on him if they're Brun owners. For instance, Brun doesn't fire, but that's just the mathematics behind it all, and the stock perspective taken. But it comes down to, do you think that someone like Jack Bowes, if he plays, can average 78? Do you think a Warpool can average 84? And that's the decisions which, as a viewer or as a super coach player, needs to consider.
Absolutely. And a lot of this is based off your own predictions as well. And that's why it's so important to get the eye test, look at previous numbers, because with someone like a Jack Bowes, for me, I'm just not too sure. There are too many question marks. I don't know what his role is going to be. So for me, he goes out of calculations. I need to be pretty confident on a mid-pricer that I select in my side that they do have the potential to make close to that 150K. We talked about someone like Yo as possibly being different circumstances, but in an ideal world, that's what we're always looking for. We'll just quickly go through some of the plays. So we got Yo, Bowes, Jones. Stock is an interesting one, along with Jimby. And this is where, geez, it gets a little bit crowded in this midfield, doesn't it? So Setterfield, Hopper, Warple, and Callaghan, probably the 4 most popular picks there. We can see Setterfield needs to average 91, yet Callaghan 72. So you need to ask yourself, well, what's more realistic there? Setterfield with his bigger body, that inside midfield role, a few more years in the system, 91, or we think Callaghan, even though he's got a wing role. It's so tough, isn't it? These are questions that you've really got to ask yourself. We've got Ashcroft, McKenzie, and Phillips here as well. Phillips for a 57. I think he can absolutely do that. And then Fife, Braun, Flanders, Sheasel, and Radaglia. Radaglia is another example of a bloke who I don't necessarily need 150K straight away. It's more security for me. Yeah. And even come the buys, I know that Rowan Marshall and Shrek is becoming a more popular combination by the day. And look, we're looking into the future here. Who knows if Radaglia is going to be in the side or not? But just say if he is during that buy round, then, hey, at least you've got one warm body in that ruck line instead of, losing the 2 slots there.
Well, one thing to add, is that Jack Siebel's not on that list. He's priced at 65. So he needs to average 93 to net 150K, which is a bit steep. If we get 2021, Jack Siebel, possibly, but it's a big price to pay for 356K for a North defender. It makes sense, but I think it's a bit too much. I'd rather go for Fife or Brun at a lower price. We'll talk a bit more about Sam Flanders in the coming days, but what are your thoughts on him? Do you think he can get 75? He was BOG, I reckon, in both, or close to BOG for Gold Coast in both games, playing one of the worst Supercoach positions as a half-forward flank, but he got 100 in both games.
That's the issue for me. It doesn't make sense. Why is he scoring this much? We all know about his VFL numbers. That's well documented. Big difference, obviously, being that in the VFL, it was an inside midfielder. That's where he played all this time there and rested forward at times. But it just doesn't make sense that someone should be able to score this well in that particular role. But we have seen it 2 weeks in a row. And we mentioned before about looking for breakouts versus traps. Are they going to play the same role in the season proper? And Sam Flanders will. He's going to be playing the exact same role that we've seen him score. Was it 100 plus or very close to 100 plus in both games? With one of those very, very close to a best on ground performance. So there's a lot to like about the Flanders pick, apart from the role for me. But he seems to actually push into the stoppages a lot. So he does seem to get involved and actually get around the football. He's an early draft pick, a talented junior. I think that he's got all the tools to break out. I just don't love the role. A few CBAs, that's a bit of a bonus there. Look, at the moment, it goes back to our point that we were talking about before. Start with a high price mid-pricer, and then you can go down early. At the moment, I've got a bit of a high price mid-pricer ahead of Flanders, but this is going to be very dependent on the team sheets. Come the team sheets, if this particular mid-pricer isn't named on field for me, must be named on field, then he goes out and Flanders comes in.
I like how you're keeping that a secret, DR. You gotta keep your cards close to your chest. But yeah, with Flanders, he had 19% CBAs in a game without Took, and you're like, well, it's not like he scored 100 with Took without Took, and he's playing full time mid. It makes no sense. Seriously,
I know.
I have no idea how he's doing this. Maybe he's just a good footballer.
He's a great footballer, mate. And I think he'll be another fun player to watch as well. So very, very, very much in my calculations. Oh, it's going to be come down to the last couple of days for me, I think, on that one, mate.
But for the viewers, that's the idea behind the 150K. Not all your guys need to make 150K. Some guys you might start two players. One of them makes 200K, one of them makes 100K. Together, they've made 300K for you, and you can use that to upgrade to a premium and a rookie, given that the guy that makes 100K has provided you with some valuable points on the field, or it's just bench fodder, and he's just there as a bench guy that's got you through some tough times with some decent coverage, So that's the sort of thing you want to be thinking about.
Fantastic, mate. And absolutely love the table that you've put together as well there, mate. All right, let's get into our next point. It's all about backing your gut, and it can be very hard to do sometimes. It is very easy to simply go with the crowd, but I think it's extremely important to back yourself, back your gut. What can you tell us about this one, mate?
I think it's so important that no matter how you see those ownership numbers, no matter how much you see these stats on Twitter and YouTube podcasts, like even this one, we're trying to help you guys out here, so we're not trying to sway anyone here or there. But you got to back in your gut. I know last year, a lot of my early season moves were based on everyone's getting Patrick Cripps in, get him in, he gets injured, take him out, get him back in again because he's going gangbusters again. Which sort of started the season off a bit of a roller coaster, but then later in the season got into a bit more of those gut picks. So Connor Rosie was massive on the way home, sort of brought the boys home. Sam Berry, quite similar. So you just got to, that's in season, but with your starting team, just back in your gut. If you think that a player is going to go 100 and other people think he's going to go 90, you probably have a reason for why you think he's going to go 100. So don't let other people sway you away from that belief unless it's substantiated. What do you think, Dia?
Absolutely. And again, it comes down to the eye test. It comes down to doing your own research. It's funny, I missed one of the practice games and read a few reports, and author one, completely different to author two, a different summation of the match. One guy absolutely killed it. Yet, the other picks are really disappointing. So I think it's really, really important not just to listen to other people. And look, there's some great content out there. I think when I say it's important not to just listen to other people. In saying that, I think it's important to listen to a variety of people, a variety of different views, because what I think you may have a completely opposite view to. So I think that's super important. But nothing can beat doing your own research and getting your own eye test. For me, that is just super, super important. Don't try to let someone talk you out of a pick that you're really, really set on. I think it's really important to make sure you have your pros list and your cons list. For me, I'm trying to think of a player. Darcy Cameron was a player like that for me this preseason. At the end of the day, some of those pros diminished, more came onto the cons section. And for me, it just didn't make sense to probably go with Cameron for me. And again, lots of other people are still running with him. But my gut said to me that probably it's not the right decision to have a placeholder in the ruck. So I probably just need to spend up and, just swallow my pride there and go against my original strategy, mate.
And that's exactly it. It comes back to that idea of confirmational bias, doesn't it? You want to listen to some other perspectives to see whether or not they agree with your view, but it shouldn't still take away from what you're thinking about this player. Just make sure that you're not in this tunnel vision, all these Supercoach cliches that we talk about. Just make sure you don't have this tunnel vision for players, like confirmational sort of thing. Make sure that's all substantiated by statistics, by your eye test, and then their role as well as one of the big things to consider there.
Absolutely, mate. Anything else you want to add to back in your gut?
Not really. Let's go on to monitoring some early season role changes.
Extremely important, mate. Tell us about this, monitoring early season role changes.
Now, a lot of coaches in the past have been finessed by preseason watching, and great example, Darcy McPherson 2 years ago came onto the scene. 1/3 is in both games. You think, oh, here we go. Same with I think it was Lockie Weller last year for Gold Coast.
Yes, he did, didn't he?
These Gold Coast halfbacks, I'm telling you,
I not picked him up in draft, I think, with a pretty early selection, mate. Spewing.
and then they sputtered up early in the season. You're like, this isn't what I signed up for. So, and this is what we're going to talk about next as well. But be proactive. If you don't like the role of a player, just make the corrective trade. Get in a guy that you do like the role of, which is why I think it's really important to watch. Yeah, so it's really important to watch round 1 and round 2 games closely before those first price rises, because there just might be something little that irks you, like a play in preseason. They're floating up from behind the stoppage as the halfback and getting ready to receive the handball from a teammate, and that's happening preseason, but it's not happening in the regular season, and someone else has that role, and you're like, that's 1 kick per quarter less. 4 kicks is 15 points. That's 15 points potentially off the average.
All adds up, mate, doesn't it? Absolutely all adds up.
Same with kick-ins. If a player's touted to take kick-ins in preseason, but they don't take it in the home and away season, you're like, that's not what I signed up for. One of the things I've really liked seeing is who's in the goal square as a defender when there's a set shot being taken. Because they're most likely to be the designated kick-in taker, you would think, theoretically, unless they're on the mark.
True, yeah.
But if they're in the goal square, they go to get the ball and they handball it off to a teammate, they're not the kick-in taker. It's the guy they handball it off to. Perhaps the person that gets the handball is the designated kick-in taker. And that's, again, 1 kick less per quarter. And those points add up. That's what makes the difference between an Uber and a top 15 mid. Not mid, sorry, I'm talking about defenders here. Top 6 and a top 10 mid defender.
Absolutely, mate.
Be proactive early, make those decisions, back your gut. They all go hand in hand here. These are all tips to help get personal best rec or rankings in SuperCoach, and go on your way to win SuperCoach, which would be great for one of your viewers to do, DR.
Absolutely, mate. And I tell you what, since I played the game, I don't think that I haven't used my 2 trades before the price rises. Every year of playing the game, I've used both of those trades. And even when we've got our boosts now, which we'll get to in a little bit, may even be able to be a really good chance to use one of your boosts just to get things right early. There's always a rookie that we haven't selected that comes out like an absolute house on fire, maybe a couple of 80+ scores that we missed out on somehow. All of a sudden, you want to get that, one of those rookies in. There's possibly a mid-pricer that you've missed out on. You can't select them all. Maybe you've selected the wrong one, and that's pretty obvious early. But I'm not generally a fan of actually trading out premiums too early, like you mentioned, I think, when we're talking about team structure, Janath. So I think it's a really, really good idea to use those 2 trades before the price rises, just to make sure you get in possibly a couple of must-have players.
Let's say at least 2 trades.
At least
2 trades.
We'll get unless to the
unless your team is spotless and there's nothing to change. I think it's very important that you get you get ahead of the curve and get
Well,
those players in before price rises. But we'll get there.
obviously, my team's never been spotless, mate. So I've never managed to make the perfect side, but hopefully this year is the year. Wouldn't it be nice not to have to trade? That would be the
That would
absolute
be
dream, mate.
ideal.
Absolute
Would be
dream.
ideal.
All right, let's move on to number 10. Trading rookies a week early. Now, it's really tough sometimes when it comes to trading out rookies. When is the right time? There's many rookies that I've traded out too early. A Kaczynski is an example where I thought, he's a little bit dead here, not much cash gen. Let's get him out, bring someone in. And then a couple of weeks later, he's had a really nice spike score. Bang, off he goes with his cash gen as well. But one thing that I quickly wanted to bring up, mate, before we get your take on this one, is that I think it's okay to trade out a rookie that's got a little bit more cash to give if you're trading in a fallen premium. So let's just say, for example, you've got a rookie and you can see that most likely he's got 25 grand more to make this week. If I'm bringing in someone like a Callum Mills, just throw a name out there, and he's already gone down 100K, maybe after a concussion game or some sort of injury or tag game, then you've also got to take that into account. You're not going to make that extra 25K, but you are jumping on someone for 100K cheaper. So in those circumstances, I think it is more than okay to trade out a rookie a week early. But you've got to get it right, because I traded out Dacos last year. That absolutely burnt me, and I'll never live that one down. So it's never as easy as what I suppose the example I've just brought up. But what are your thoughts on trading rookies a week early, mate?
I'm going to add, because I think you'd summed up perfectly, I'm going to add to that Mills example. So let's say Callum Mills has gone a 70, 80, 110, 115. And if he scores 110, he's projected to go up 20K. So even though your rookie has already met his break even, and his break even is higher than his projected, which is something that I really like to do, is see what their break even is, and what their projected is a bit iffy. I'd rather go by average. So if your break even is higher than your average thus far in the season, you're ready to cut as a rookie. But you've got to consider, you can't get Mills the week late, you might get priced out. So if you want to move a week early, increase that upgrade cadence, get a player in that you think is going to be in the optimal finish team, do it. Get that player in, move swiftly. It's something to get ahead of the curve, and used it quite effectively in the past, especially with someone like a Chad Warner a couple of years ago. He was sort of petering out around the 60s, where he's not increasing in price, but he's doing okay enough to keep in your team. But it's like, just get rid of him, get an upgrade in there, and you're going to net points on a weekly basis by doing this. Yes, you may have a lower team value at the end of the season compared to another team that's just kept their rookies until they fully appreciate, and there's just no chance they get to their break evens. But you've got players on them. You're moved early, and you've got an extra couple of points at least on them. And at the end of the day, the SuperCoach winner is the person that's got the most points, not the highest team value.
Exactly right. Exactly right. And at the end of the day, that's our goal, isn't it? To get to full premium as quick as possible. So I wouldn't worry too much about 20K here or there if you're jumping on someone like a fallen premium, because that money can just basically balance out, mate.
And also you've got to consider who the rookies are coming in that week. So for instance, we always talk about, all right, you get an inner premium, but you've got to bring someone in, right? So if there's a really good rookie that's got high scoring potential, has really good JS, you move a week early on getting rid of a couple of rookies that you can easily replace them with someone that may average close to what that person is scoring, or have better JS than the person that's going out. So those are sort of considerations you want to have. We'll talk a lot more about this throughout the season, hopefully when we get onto the Swordplay podcast.
Absolutely.
We get that up and running, but these are sort of considerations you want to have throughout the season.
Could not agree more, mate. Fantastic discussion. Trading rookies a week early. We think it's okay to do, depending on the circumstances. You ready to talk a bit about boosts, mate?
Let's do it.
Let's go. So we do have another visual here. Let's have a look at how we actually used our boosts last year. So you've got the table here. I think Janath just must have included this to show his final rank that he actually kicked my butt last year, to be quite honest. But boosts, a new feature of the game, a new and exciting feature of the game. And I love that the Herald's son, Al Payton, and his crew have brought things like this in because it does add an extra element of strategy as well as excitement as well. We've got our trade boosts from last year. So obviously we both used all 5. I think it's crazy if you don't use all 5 of your boosts. But for me, round 3, 6, 7, 9, and 10. And then we got Janath there, 3, 7, 8, 10, and 14. So we match up on round 3, mate. Also match up on round 10. You've gone 7, 8. I've gone 7, 9. And it looks like you were a little bit more savvy than me and actually saved one for your round 14 bye. How did it work out for you, mate? Do you have any regrets about the way that you used your boosts last year? Or do you think that you used them as effectively as you could, mate?
Well, to provide a little bit of context for this, in 2021, you might remember when Marcus Bontempelli was doing Marcus Bontempelli things, and it was almost impossible to get in a standard week where there was just 2 trades, or even in a bye week where there's 3 trades. So I was falling just short of getting him in at a ridiculous price because he is just going gangbusters on everyone, the non-owners. So that was my logic last year, was if there was a guy that's coming off his bye, that's at a high price, I can get them with 4 trades because I know I probably won't be able to get them with 3 trades. I can't trade out 3 people and get in a really good player. So having 4 trades in that week was really beneficial, not for that instance, but he got me 2 premiums that were coming off their buys, and having that strategy and planning, being able to move into the 3rd buy and onwards with having extra 2 premiums, as opposed to only being able to get 1 in when you only have 3 trades. Because that's the thing, right? You want to be able to do 1 trade towards to get up to a premium, 1 trade to go down. But with 3 trades, unless you have money in the bank, it's hard to get 2 premiums in. And to have money in the bank, you've probably done a double downgrade somewhere, and that's sort of disrupted that upgrade cadence as well.
Absolutely. Is that something? Yeah. Oh, sorry, man. I was just going to ask, is that something actually planned for at the start of the season to actually use one during your buys for this particular purpose?
Well, my original plan was 1 round 3 and then 2 in the buys. Not in the first buy, because you rarely ever trade in the first buy. Because it doesn't make sense, because you'd want to get players coming off their buy, not go in. Well, you might, if there's a player that you're fine in one of the buys and you just want to get them in to have a player in one of the buys you're struggling with, that's fine. Yeah. But the idea was to have 2 for the buys. Only ended up with 1, but that's fine because you sort of have to be flexible throughout the season. And especially when the upgrade season is starting, which I think for you, from the looks of it, was round 6.
Yeah, it was round 6.
Yeah, I think mine was round 6 as well, but I wanted to sort of speed that up a little bit with those boosts in back-to-back weeks. And then for you as well, you went back-to-back, a little bit break, 1 week rest, and then back-to-back again. So
went pretty hard, didn't I, mate? Went pretty hard.
It's the strategy there, and that's 12 trades in 4 weeks, which is something that's unheard of in Supercoach, right? Back in the day when you have 20 trades for the whole season.
That's right. And this is where I think lots of us look to upgrade as well. Look, I think that there's a number of different ways that you can use your boost. We can see that we both used one in round 3. Obviously, that was just before the price rises, and we did touch on that before. I think that's a really good idea. Look, and you don't have to. Don't use it if you don't need to. But I think for most teams, it would be beneficial because rarely do you get so many things right. So I'd really recommend looking to use it then. Another thing, or another strategy I think to keep in mind as well, Janath, and one thing for me that gets really frustrating during the season is that you've obviously only got your 2 trades. You may be really, really keen on a couple of rookies that are on the bubble. They're looking really great. You really want both of them in. And you've also possibly got a fallen premium. It could be someone like a Clayton Oliver that his break-even's down to 50-odd after an injury or a tag game, and he's going to go bang next week and most likely get out of reach. So using a boost in that case, you can almost have your cake and eat it too. I can get my 2 rookies in, make my 2 downgrades, but with that cash also bring in that fallen premium that's got a really low break even and might possibly be out of reach for me, or it might be, you know, an elite premium that's coming up to a really good run. You know, they might have West Coast North in the next month, for example. You really want to get them in for that potential hot run that they might have. So the whole eat your cake, no, have your cake. Geez, I'm getting confused now. Have your cake and eat it too. It is something that I might actually look to do this year myself, and look to plan to keep one for a potential situation like that, mate.
Or getting Darcy Parish before a medal game.
There we go. Anzac Day. When's Anzac Day? We know what happened after Anzac Day.
He loves his medals. So but no, on a serious note, that's perfect. There's just so many different ways you can use it. But I think having 3 between the round 3 and the buys, but the thing is we have 4 buys this year. At the same time, I don't think you need to use, you might want to keep 2 boosts for the buys, because you might want to get in the Took Stewart combination after their buy, or because it goes 4 teams, 2 teams, 6 teams, 6 teams on the buys this year. So it's a bit different. There's an extra round because of gather round as well. So you just might contemplate when to use those. Ideally, I think I might be doing 1 boost penciled in for round 3. If you don't use it, you don't use it, and you have 1 for the rest of the year. And then 2 buys for the buys, 2 boosts for the buys, and then just planning to use those 2 boosts around the start of upgrade season, or like you said, to get in the Clayton Oliver without feeling worried about getting left behind the following week.
Yep, love it, mate. Love it. And I think another thing to touch on with the boost as well, if you're going a bit of mid-price madness, you may look to get pretty aggressive with those boosts and get these blokes up as early as you can to maybe some premium picks. It's going to be so interesting. And this is why I love the addition of the trade boosts, because there's no right or wrong way to use them. A lot of it is circumstantial. And look, to be honest, you can have the best laid plans possible. Look, we're going to say that hopefully we'll leave 2 for the buys, but who knows, we may have some injury carnage where we maybe even be forced to use a boost. I hope that's not the case. But look, it's always good to have some plans in place anyway, mate.
Yeah, perfect. I think we nailed that.
All right.
The last tip.
It is, mate. We are at number 12, the last tip, and it is looking into the future. We need a bit of a crystal ball here, but we're quickly going to talk about buys and DPPs. So we don't need that slide anymore. You already touched on the buys. We've got 4 this year. We've obviously got Geelong and Gold Coast just sharing the 1 buy. So very interesting whether or not people are looking to start those blokes in their team, knowing that they're not really going to be missed during that buy and they can cover for other buys. That may be an interesting strategy for this year. But look, Janath, when it comes to selecting your team, do you actually take the buys into account? And if so, how much do you actually focus on the buys and look ahead into the future, mate?
I think it's too early to think about the buys. Pick the players you want to pick for the reasons based off what you've seen rather than what may happen. By the time the buys roll around, 4 of your keepers that you are planning for the buys, they may not even be in your team. They may be injured. They may be suspended. They may have just hopefully not fallen off a cliff in average-wise. It's just too early to think about your buys. It's good. So don't have all your premiums in 1 buy right now, because it's going to be too much to overcome. But I don't think you need to put too much emphasis on, all right, I can have a maximum number of guys from this buy, a maximum number of guys from that buy. Planning is difficult enough, isn't it, with regards to making these split decisions, that the buy may be the final sort of, it may be the tipping point. It's what helps you choose this guy over that guy if they're the exact same elsewhere. But it shouldn't really matter too much. Someone like Took, if you didn't have the preseason niggle, which is something we sort of skipped over, but we can bring it up now, is guys with preseason niggles, I just stay away from them. I need to see them in a practice game. I need to see them, how they're performing. Are they tackling as hard? Like if Took, after his hamstring awareness sort of issues, is he covering the ground as well? And then if he is, bring him in before his buy, and you have a perfect Took that may have fallen in price well, one of the possible early upgrades. Same goes to Tom Stewart, although Tom Stewart hasn't really had any setbacks, I don't think, this season. But again, you can just wait and see if you don't start him, because he's got a good GMHBA run coming up in the middle of the season, which will be very important to have Tom Stewart for. I
Very
imagine.
juicy. Very juicy. And yeah, absolutely agree. And George is massive on this. Any niggles injuries during the preseason, he basically wipes them off his list. And, an example is someone like a Timmy English this year. I was pretty keen on starting English due to his high upside this year. But 1, 2, 3 niggles, no, I just wouldn't risk it. And particularly when we're talking about premium priced players, if we're talking about a rookie type player, you may want to take the risk. But if we're paying up any decent cash, we want players that have had a ripping preseason and are going to hit the ground running for sure. Going back to the buys, I do agree with you. I think it's always important to keep them in mind when you are selecting your starting side. So, for example, if you find out that you're running with 4 premium midfielders and they all share the same buy, then that would scare me slightly. But I totally agree with what you're saying, mate. There's so much water to go under the bridge. And the way that our teams are looking in round 1, let's be honest, are going to be completely different when it actually comes to the buys. And one thing that really hurt me, I don't know if it was last year or the year before, but I didn't bring in Jack Steele because of that buy factor. I thought, nah, it's going to hurt me. I'm going to be one extra one down the year before during the buys. And I forget who I picked up, but it was a mediocre player, someone who I was not near as hot on as Jack Steele. And then he just had a magnificent run, sort of outpriced me. And it was a terrible decision. I was focusing just on that 1 week rather than the last half of the season. So that was a real lesson learned for me. And that's why I really do agree with you. Certainly take them into account, have a look at how your buy structure is looking, but don't let that be the deciding factor when you're looking to bring in a player. I think that will really hurt you for the remainder of the season. And it's certainly hurt me in the past, mate, for sure.
Again, we'll probably touch on this a bit later in the season, but if you're 1 down in a best 18 week, it's not the end of the world. Like, just bring in the guy that you want to bring in and that has the highest upside for the remainder of the season. So someone like Zach Merritt, he's just a renowned performer post-buy. Might change now that he's the captain. We'll see.
The captain, that's right.
The captain. But again, those sort of guys that you just know something about the buy, they get a week of rest and then they just come back a different player. But yes, I'm sure you learnt your lesson that year from Jack Steele, didn't you? It was very, very fun owning him that year.
I tell you what, it was not fun not owning him. I can tell you that much, mate.
Was
just like Rory Laird and Dawson last year.
Rory Laird last year?
No, I didn't, mate. And this is the thing. This is the thing. There was just never a time where I could bring him in. I was just compromising other areas of the ground. And that's why I'm just locking the man in this year. There is no way that I'm not going to start with Rory Laird this year. And maybe it was a bit of FOMO from last year and the dagger is still there in my heart. But no, I'm certainly paying up this year, mates. DPPs is another thing I want to quickly touch on. What's going to happen this year? So we saw last year with the addition of the DPPs that all of a sudden there became a heap of must-have forwards. You had your Libbers there. You had your Bontempellis. Smith came in. Lukey Parker was another one that made his way in. Geez, it was a different strategy last year, wasn't it? Because what happened was some of us thought, well, we've pretty much got our forward line set, but now there's some must-have players that you've almost got to bring into your side. So, look, just off the top of my head this year, I think that there's a chance that either or both Grundy and Gawn get DPP status ruck forward. So that may be something that you want to keep in mind. Maybe that would, you'd avoid starting them, knowing that maybe you can get them cheaper and in your forward line, for example. Will we get someone like Christian Petracca this year? There's a lot of talk around the fact that him and Cozzy Pickett might be rotating exclusively midfield forward. I certainly think he'll get more of a midfield split than a forward split, but certainly a possibility for DPP. Some of the old dogs like Travis Boak, he's going to be playing some more time off a half forward, you'd assume. So what do you think?
Whitfield the other way?
Sorry, mate?
Lockie Whitfield going the other way, midfield.
Lockie Whitfield's the other one, isn't it?
Wanganeen Malera. Yeah, Wanganeen Malera as a midfielder. That's probably going to get DPP defensive.
1% ownership, isn't he?
Wait
for my team reveal, mate. Wait for my team reveal.
Here we go.
Wait for my team reveal.
But yeah, so these are all sort of things you need to consider. I guess you might think last year, so you got English, Bont, Libba, Bailey Smith, Parker, but a lot of Endon teams still had Will Brodie. So it's like, even though you start all these forwards, I don't think it's too much of a concern just yet, because again, the future, you can't predict the future. One of Brodie Grundy or Max Gawn may go down, and then if you started Max Gawn in the hope that he's going to get DPP, if Grundy goes down, it's a win, because like, unfortunately Grundy goes down, but Gawn's going to get full rucks at it, like he's going to be a sole ruck, but at the same time, he may not get the DPP.
Absolutely.
So it's hard to predict into the future. 6 weeks is a long period of time in footy. Who knows? Max Gawn may end up as a defender.
Who knows? And it's so close sometimes. Is it 35%?
35.
35.
They make it so that you can't have 3 decisions. So if it was 30%, you may somehow end up with 30% defender, 30% midfielder, 30%
Imagine
forward.
That. The triple player.
But no, it's good. It's good having the DPP, and someone like a Toby McLean, a Saab Radically, those that start with DPP as well. They're handy, but then you have the futuristic DPPs that just play into its beauty. It's super fun to play in Supercoach. It's sort of very similar to fantasy in terms of how they get the new DPPs in the game. So it's much more fun to follow than having to stick with the team. I remember last year I brought in Bailey Smith. I think it was like round 7, before his drug scandal, before his headbutting scandal. He was on 50 at quarter time against Adelaide, and then he scored 90. I was stuck with him for like 5 weeks because I couldn't do anything. He wasn't getting DPP, and he was just in the midfield, just blocking up a spot. But luckily, just snuck in for DPP before he headbutted Saktui, and so it was like, So those are the sort of things, they sort of allow you to get out of your own mistakes.
And the other thing is, we mentioned that 35% rate. Some players I know last year were like 33.5, 34. There was some that was so close. So it is a very dangerous game, actually predicting future DPP and basing trading decisions around that. Because if you're just a couple of percent off, then you could be stuck with a player that you really didn't want to have in your side.
Well, last year was Bontempelli, because everyone thinks he's going to get DPP and people are trading him in. But then there's others like me, I wasn't so sure. But those that did bring Bontempelli in easily got points and got the DPP, and you're trying to scramble yourself here. How can I get Bontempelli in? He's a must-have. He's a forward. But yeah, it was quite funny. It was quite hysterical how the dogs, you just put a whole dogs forward line together for Supercoach.
It was unbelievable. But again, it comes down to backing your gut, doesn't it? We don't know what's going to happen in the future, but all you can do is do your research and back your gut, mate. I really like that point that you brought up before.
Back your gut. Well, I think we've covered off what we think are the 12 sort of key principles or key tips that we can give for winning Supercoach. Do you want to have any final remarks, Dio?
No, look, mate, I just wanted to thank you for coming on again. You are going to be an absolute regular on this channel with the Supercoach Swordplay podcast that we are going to get up just before round 1 as well. So, mate, cannot thank you enough. The research that you do, the time and the preparation that you put into these videos is unprecedented, mate. I just am super impressed by everything that you do. Very excited as well. You're actually going to come onto the channel again tomorrow for a bit of a team preview, I believe, mate.
Well, I think that is in the plan. We'll see how the viewers enjoyed this video, and hopefully they rack up the likes. So it shows that I'm providing good advice and helping everyone out in the community to get PB ranks. And hopefully, I'm really hoping that one of us does win Supercoach, and DR, you'll be right at the forefront of that.
Oh, it's a tough competition with blokes like you, mate. Tough competition with blokes like you. It's getting tougher these days. I remember when I first started playing Supercoach, if you just did a little bit of research yourself, you were so far ahead of the game. It's not funny. There was, Supercoach Talk, Jock Reynolds, the OGs, but there wasn't a heap of content out there. But you look at, what we have in front of us these days. content absolutely everywhere, which means that it is getting tougher and tougher to get a higher rank. And that's why I'm so impressed again with you, mate, for your rankings in the last 3 seasons, just top 1%, top 1%. I think that's a bit of a pattern. And I think that pattern will definitely continue as well this year, mate.
Appreciate that. Hopefully we can use our own tips here and achieve PD ranks again.
Exactly right. Now, before we let you go, Janath, where can people find you, mate? And we know you're on Twitter. Do we find you on Instagram? What's your socials, mate? And how do we get in contact with you in case we want to have a chat with you?
Twitter's probably the best place. I'm quite open to DMs. So it's Janath at Janath Fernando 4. Probably put that down in somewhere there.
I'll have it in the description there, mate. Yeah.
Description, yeah. But yeah, feel free to send through any teams to want advice with. I try to provide as much objective analysis as possible. You know, I like having stats to substantiate stuff. So that's that. But yeah, looking forward to tomorrow's vid, hopefully. And we'll see you then, Theo.
Awesome, mate. Well, thanks for coming again, mate. And thank you very much for watching, guys. It's always a pleasure having Janath on. Hopefully you are one of the people. They're going to be right up there this year. And hopefully, if you're watching, you can take it out this year because with all the advice we've just got from Janath there, the 12 steps to SuperCoach success, I'm sure that we'll find a winner out of our subscribers. So thanks very much for watching, guys. All the best. And we'll see you tomorrow with some special team reveals. Cheers. Bye.